Fourth inning. Racquetball. Negro League owners. Baseball really is an expensive thing to operate. Effa Manley, co-owner of the Newark Eagles. In October 1929, the U.S. stock market crashed and sent the country spiraling downward into what is known as the Great Depression. Businesses collapsed and banks closed, taking people's life savings with them. People were losing their jobs left and right, and soon it seemed everybody was out of work. What little money people had left could only be spent on food and heat. The Depression hit white baseball hard and Negro baseball even harder. The Eastern Colored League and the great Negro National League that Rube Foster had built fell apart after 12 seasons. Most teams disappeared. The teams that remained drifted around barnstorming wherever they could, passing the hat. At the same time, Rube Foster was committed to a mental institution. Running the league and trying to keep everything together all those years had taken their toll on him. The Eastern League owners started raiding his league for players, and it sent him over the edge. Not long after that, he passed away. It was terrible to see this happen to such a great man. He did what no one else could do, and now all that he had worked for was gone. Within a very short time, the economy failed, the Eastern Colored League folded, and both Rube and his great Negro National League were laid to rest. It looked like the grand old days of the Negro Leagues were over. Despite the hard times, there were a few who did make money during the Depression. They were known as numbers men, racketeers. Some were intelligent black men who could have been stockbrokers or general managers of great corporations, but because of segregation were not able to hold these positions. Instead, they found another way to make big money: the numbers game. Back then, it was a 100% illegal business. But nowadays, it's known as the lottery, and it's run by the government. These numbers men went around town taking people's penny bets on predicting some random number from the stock market pages in the paper, or something like that. If you guessed the right number, depending on the odds, you could make some good money. But some of those guys wouldn't pay up if your number hit big, so people didn't always bet with them. There was, however, one fella who always made good on his bets. His name was Gus Greenlee. He was the king of the numbers game in Pittsburgh. He owned a bar called the Crawford Grill, where all the big Negro stars performed, from singing legend Lena Horne to Bill Bojangles Robinson, the great dancer and entertainer. Greenlee wore expensive suits and drove around town in his Duesenberg, a fancy car that in those days was worth a fortune. He also had a few fighters. One was none other than the world light heavyweight champ, John Henry Lewis. And in 1930, he decided he was getting into the baseball business. It ended up being a great thing because that fella did a lot of good for Negro baseball. He picked up right where Rube left off. He reorganized the whole Negro National League and bought a team of his own, renaming it the Pittsburgh Crawfords. Across town, there was a team called the Homestead Grays. They were a strong ball club that had come up from the steelworker leagues, but by this time they were struggling because of the Depression. Like most folks, the owner, Cumberland Posey, needed money and was forced to sell off some of his best players. Gus Greenlee bought them all with a big smile and put together possibly one of the greatest teams in the history of baseball. It was a team of all-stars. Josh Gibson, the Black Babe Ruth, William Julius Judy Johnson, a star third baseman, Ted Page, an outstanding outfielder, Ted Double Duty Radcliffe, who used to pitch the top half of a doubleheader and catch the bottom half, and Jake Stevens. And to add to that, Satchel Paige, the most famous Negro League pitcher of all time, and James Cool Papa Bell, the fastest man in all of baseball. If that wasn't enough, he got the great Oscar Charleston to play with and manage them. It was a powerhouse. 5 of those guys wound up in the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, New York. Man, that team was unbeatable. Well, they were unbeatable until Greenlee's numbers business got him into some trouble with the law. Someone on the inside of his operation had started to leak information to the police, and Gus ended up on the run. After that, his star players jumped the team to go play ball down in Santo Domingo. That was the end of the mighty Pittsburgh Crawfords. Baseball was an expensive business to operate. Many of the owners made their money in the numbers business and used it to support their baseball teams, like Abe and Effa Manley, who owned the Newark Eagles. You also had Alex Pompez, owner of the Cuban Stars and the New York Cubans, and Sonny Man Jackson, who had a stake in the Homestead Grays. But there were also doctors, a few black celebrities, and even a couple of undertakers. World-famous trumpeter Louis Armstrong had his secret 9-ball club, and Bill Bojangles Robinson partly owned the New York Black Yankees. The world heavyweight boxing champ Joe Louis had a softball club, and Cab Calloway, the swing orchestra conductor, had his team of all-stars, and sometimes he even played, too. We knew many of the black entertainers and celebrities personally. It really wasn't a thing to see Lena Horne or Count Basie in the same hotel where we were staying. We went to see their shows after a game, and sometimes we would have dinner with them. They were on the road as much as we were, and they had to stay in the same Negro hotels and rooming houses. Some folks called it the Chitlin Circuit. Most owners didn't make much money from their teams. Baseball was just a hobby for them, a way to make their illegal money look good. To save money, each team would only carry 15 or 16 players. The major league teams each carried about 25. Average salary for each player started at roughly $125 per month back in '34 and went up to $500 to $800 during the '40s, though there were some who made much more than that, like Satchel Paige and Josh Gibson. The average major league player's salary back then was about $1,200 per month. We also got around 50 cents to $1 per day for food allowance. Back then, you could get a decent meal for about 25 cents to 75 cents. Some of the owners didn't treat their players very well. Didn't pay them enough or on time. That's why we would jump from team to team. Other owners would offer us more money, and we would leave our teams and go play for them. We were some of the first unrestricted free agents. There were, however, a few owners who did know how to treat their ball players. Come Posey was one of them. He always took care of his ball players, put them in the best hotels, and paid them well and on time. Buck Leonard said Posey never missed a payday in the 17 years he played for the Grays. Gus Greenlee built his team a ballpark, first ballpark ever built for a Negro team. After home games, his players would go to his restaurant to have dinner and meet the pretty girls who were already there waiting for him. Women have always loved ball players, you know. Gus also gave some of his ball players jobs during the off-season. He even bought a team bus and printed Pittsburgh Crawfords on the side. Abe and Effa Manley heard about it and bought one for their team, too. Effa was a sweetheart, a real smart lady, and not bad on the eyes either. She always made sure her players looked good, on and off the field. Had those boys looking sharp with their suits and hats. Shoes shine like mirrors. Her husband Abe was a nice fellow, too. He always traveled with the team. Not every owner did that. J.L. Wilkinson, who owned the Kansas City Monarchs, was one of the few white owners in Negro baseball. Like Rube Foster, he ran his team like it was a big league ball club. Did you know his team was the first to play night games in professional ball? In 1930, the Monarchs had the first portable lighting system in organized baseball. The major leagues didn't begin playing night games until 1935. Night baseball changed everything. All those folks who had to work during the day were now able to see a baseball game in the evening. While it was still light, The players set the lights up on poles around the field next to first and third base and in the outfield. They had these big dynamos hooked up to generators run by a 250 horsepower engine housed in a truck parked way in the outfield. Sometimes the lights would dim and we'd have to stop for a few minutes until the generators kicked back up again. They weren't really bright enough to play a baseball game, but we would play anyway. It was really hard to see the ball. If a fly ball was hit above the lights, you would have to pray it would find your glove, or else you just got out of the way. We also used to have trouble with outfielders running into the poles chasing fly balls. Some pitchers had the best games of their careers pitching night games. We put a long piece of white canvas along the center field fence so the batter could see the ball better coming over the plate. A lot of people would come out for those night games. Night baseball was good for the league. It meant another payday for everybody. But it also made our lives tougher because it meant we could play 3, even 4 games a day instead of 2. Satchel was right when he said, we were worked like the mule that plows the field during the week and pulls the carriage to church on Sunday morning.